Welcome to Ogles channel. Thanks for watching today, and let's continue our journey to finish every single Game Boy and Game Boy Color game. And today focus on a game called Lufia: The Legend Returns for the Game Boy Color. Now, Lufia was a series I had heard about at some point in the past, but I'd never played any of the games. Evidently, it was really popular in like the SNES era, and I think they're still putting out some games here and there. But the golden age of Lufia has pretty much come and gone. And this is the third game in the series, and to me, it is a fantastic game, pretty much start to finish. Now, everybody says it's the worst of the trilogy, but to me, I really enjoyed this game, not playing the other two. Now, I've played a lot of RPGs in this challenge thus far. I played some of the Dragon Warrior games, some of the Dragon Warrior Monster games, Great Greed, Harry Potter RPGs, and this to me is the best RPG that I have played thus far in the series. And I may play better RPGs as the series continues on because I got several more years before I complete every Game Boy and Game Boy Color game. But this right here is a fantastic game, start to finish, and there's so much unique stuff about it, whether it's going to be the battle system, or the leveling up system, or the dialogue, or the characters that you're going to meet as you go, or just simply how the overall plot is structured for the game itself. It's just a really great game that's very unique in its own right, and it doesn't feel like any other RPG out there. We're going to dive into all of that and more as we journey through Lufia: The Legend Returns. Now, this particular game did move up in the queue a good bit because Zaya Liza, if I'm saying it correctly, it's Z-H-Y-L-I-S-Z. May just be letters, and I'm trying to pronounce something that's not really there. But they requested one of my earlier videos, so naturally moved up in the queue. If it's a game that you want to see me cover sooner or later, let me know the name of that game in the comments down below. And just like Lufia, I'll move it right on up. Now, I always like to start the videos up by looking at the box art for the game first. And the box art here, it really reminds me a great deal of a PS1 box art. And that's really interesting because like this game, from what I read, was originally going to be a PS1 game for the Lufia series. And then like the publisher went out of business or something. They like transferred the rights over to another company and they ended up like downsizing it all the way down to the Game Boy Color. A really interesting choice there. But like to me at least, the box art, it feels like it should have been a PS1 game, at least from the box art here. Now, you do have the hero in the bottom right-hand corner. His name is Wayne, but it's not spelled W-A-Y-N-E. It's spelled W-A-I-N, which is the most unique spelling of Wayne I've ever seen. But I'm going to rename him Ogles for the game because, you know, you get to name your hero and whatnot. And then you have Cena here off to the side, and she can be a fortune teller throughout the entire game. And she is a main character, at least for the story-wise. She doesn't have to be on your team the entire time, but there are other magicians or sorcerers that you can use. But she is definitely going to be the main part of the story. And then you have Doom Island itself, which is the core enemy base in the background as well. Overall, a great cover to summarize the game, but like I said, it definitely feels more like a PS1 cover instead of a Game Boy cover, in my opinion. Now, when you start the game up here, you have a really excellent cutscene, sort of hand-drawn animation, almost very cinematic movie-like here, and it tells the story of the first two Lufia games. And if it's someone who's not played the rest of the series, this was a great intro to sort of give you an idea of like where we're heading in the direction here. But it tells the story of these gods in the sky called Centrails who live on a place called Doom Island, and they basically rule over all of humanity. But they're not good gods. They're mean gods, and they're, you know, cause a lot of chaos and death and destruction amongst the humans. And so there are two great wars that take place. There's the first and second Doom Island wars, and between these two wars, all the Centrails are killed off, and humanity is able to rule over themselves, and Doom Island ceases to exist. And the main heroes that helped out with this is going to be Lufia from the first games, and also a character known as Maxim, who's going to be a descendant or a ancestor of our character for this game. So basically the intro is setting up a group of evil villain gods called Centrails who are trying to take over the world, and we're going to end up trying to fight them off when they resurrect from the dead. Now, when you start the actual game up here, you get to name your character. Like I said earlier, his name is Wayne, but I'd rename him Ogles. And then we get our first cutscene in the game, a little boat traveling across the ocean here, heading toward a town. Now, you're going to notice, like, right away, the graphics in this game, at least for the overworlds and your character sprites and such as that, are going to look almost identical to Dragon Warrior Monsters or Dragon Warrior 3. They're very, very similar to that, and that's not because they like copied it or anything like that. It's just simply because Game Boy RPGs of this era, it's like they all followed a similar kit as far as like graphics wise for the overworld. And so it's similar, but I promise you this is far, far different than Dragon Warrior. Now, a lady does get off the boat here. She journeys into this town, which is going to be my own personal hometown, and the lady's going to walk up to me and she asks if I'm a good fighter, and I'm like, yeah, I'm all right fighter here. And then she tests that by calling a giant lightning bolt out from the sky to smash into the ground. I jump out of the way, and she's like, hey, you might be an all right fighter, but we'll see. And so she's like sort of testing my skills here, but she's not like super impressed. And so then we get to take control of our character. We get to explore around the town a little bit, and we get to explore, you know, like the church where you're gonna get to save your game, or, you know, learn different spells. You can explore the item shop where you can buy new weapons or new items. You get to explore your home where you can go to bed and take a rest, or in other towns would be like an inn, to recuperate yourself. And truth be told, this is very much of a standard for every RPG. You go into a town, all the same basic shops and setups are always there every single time, and this game is not going to branch out too far from that. Now, I do mention in the dialogue here that this is very much of a poor town. Or I think the word they actually use is scrappy, and you can actually see this demonstrated because there's like little buckets in all the little houses to catch leaks from the ceiling. It's just like small details like this that sort of separate this game from the normal of the RPGs at the time. But you go outside the town, we get into our first battle system. Now when you're in the overworld here, all the battles are just simply randomly generated, sort of like a Dragon Warrior game or most RPGs, but that's going to change when we get into the actual dungeons and whatnot. But you get sucked into a battle here, and at first it seems like every other RPG. There's a little grid system off to the side, and we're going to fill that entire grid system up with all these different characters here in a little bit. But when you start off here, all you have is your main character, and you have the ability to attack, cast spells, guard, use items, and all the basics for an RPG. Like I said, it's not branched out from the mold just yet. But all the creatures you're going to fight in the little opening field here are going to be slimes. There's something about like RPGs of this era that like really did love a good slime. It wasn't just Dragon Warrior. Like tons of RPGs of the time period, like the first enemy you're going to encounter is always going to be a slime. This one looks very jello-ish in my opinion. But after you fight a few enemies here, you go back into the town, and when you go back in here, we get a cutscene of on the Tower of Death, a Sinistral is resurrecting. And when he resurrects, he starts sending out destruction across the land. And in my hometown here, he actually sets on fire one of my friend's house, Lamka's house. And the house is on fire. I rush up there. Lamka's like still stuck in the house, so I rush in there, try to rescue her, pull her out of the house, and then of course she is saved from that. And at this point, Cena, the person who was testing my skills earlier, if I was a good warrior or not, looks at me and says, "Hey, you must be really brave because you rushed into that house. You didn't care about yourself, nothing like that. You just simply rushed in there to help other people. You must be a really brave warrior." And she goes, "Actually, you are the chosen one that I want to help me on this great adventure that I'm getting ready to take place on." And I'm like, "Well, how do you know I'm the one?" She goes, "I'm actually a fortune teller, and I just simply know that you are the one who's going to help me on this great adventure." And she begins to tell me how the Sinistrals are being resurrected from the dead, and she can see all this because she's a fortune teller, and they're going to destroy humanity all over again, and she needs my help to journey along here to find them on Doom Island in order to take them down again. Now, I'm not too reluctant on this because I'm like, well, they did try to destroy my friend's house. I guess I'll journey in on this. And so we're going to try to figure out how to get to Doom Island to destroy the Sinistrals who are being resurrected. Now, we know something happened on the Tower of Death over here. And so we're like, well, obviously we need to journey there first to try to figure out what's going on. And that might be our, our starting hint here. So I journey to the store, I buy some weapons, some armors, and such for our two main characters, and off we journey off to the Tower of Death. Now to get there, we have to go through a little cave here. When I go into a cave, we have a little sage who begins to tell us sort of the basic rules or the combat of the game. Because anytime you go into a cave or a tower or a dungeon, it's going to swap over in the fighting style or the adventure style of the game. Every cave, every tower, every dungeon is randomly generated every time you go into it. The number of floors is going to be the same, but everything is random as far as like the items, the enemies, the overall layout. It will be different every single time. And so when you journey in there, enemies are going to be traveling around on the screen just like you are. And so you're going to be able to see them sort of like in the other games. And so it's not going to be just randomly stuck in the battles. You can see all the little enemies and you can avoid them if you want to, or you can walk up to them to attack them if you want to. But every time you take a step, the enemy will also take a step. So you have to sort of time out your steps a little bit as you go if you want to avoid these enemies. You can also use your sword to swing back and stun the enemies if you want to, freeze them for a little while and try to run past them. You can also use your sword to cut down little piles of grass to try to find like traps and whatnot, or use your sword to slam into the walls here, and you can find like secret passages which lead to more items inside the game. So it does feel a little bit like a Zelda game. However, like you don't actually use your sword in the overworld here or in the dungeons to attack anything. It's more just simply an exploration tool. Now, every time you do approach a monster and you get sucked into a battle, you're going to notice that you have a little grid over here like I mentioned earlier, but now we have two characters on our grid. And you can arrange these characters in any order that you want to on this particular 3x3 grid. And it really does make a huge difference where you arrange them, because every column on this little grid here, you can only choose one character from the column to attack. And so I'm going to go ahead and skip on to a little bit later in the game, at least for the instructions here, so you can see how it works. And so I've filled it up here. I have 9 different heroes inside my grid. And you can only choose one character from each column to attack, so you're going to get 3 attack moves per turn. And so you can choose the top character, the middle character, the bottom character for that first column as your attacker. And then you can choose anyone from the second column top, middle, or bottom for your second attack, and so, and the third one the same rule applies. And it actually makes a huge difference on like where your characters are positioned, because the character at the top of the column is going to be the one who can do the most damage or receive the most damage. The middle character will be able to do less damage and receive less damage because they're further back from the battle, and the character in the far back will do the least amount of damage but also receive the least amount of damage because they're so far removed from the battle itself. And so you have to sort of pick and choose where you want these characters to be on your little grid system here. Now personally, I usually pick my biggest attackers up front, and I put my healers and my sorcerers in the back because they don't really matter as much as far as like distance wise from the enemy. They just focus on healing my team. That was my own personal strategy. But that's not the only unique part of the fighting system here. You also require what are called life points every time you win a battle, and these life points can be used to upgrade to spiritual force for every individual character. And you can see here on the menu, every character is assigned a different color, and you can upgrade their spiritual force. And so like if I upgrade my main character, I gain more and more red spiritual force. And anyone who shares the same column or the row of the character that upgraded will also share that particular spiritual force. And every ancient text, which is going to be an attack that you can use inside the game, is going to require a certain amount of spiritual force. And so you have to arrange your characters in a certain way in order for them to learn certain ancient text spells and whatnot. And so there's a lot of strategy that goes into this, and like how to arrange your characters, how to figure out you want them, set up in a little diagram here or a little grid here. And so you have to think about like where you want them for attacks, where do you want them for learning different spells, where do you want them for using different spells. It's a really complex system, and honestly it can be a little bit overwhelming, but the game does try to ease you into it little by little and doesn't just sort of throw you into the deep end, because like I said, you only start off with 2 characters inside your entire grid, and I'm just sort of jumping ahead to show you like what it looks like with all the characters. And I'm not going to talk about like the individual battle system a whole lot more past this, but just know it's a really unique, really cool battle system that separates this game pretty much from every other RPG that I've played. But I journey through the cave here, and I finally get out of the cave, and I journey off to the Tower of Death, and I begin to journey up the Tower of Death. And like I said, always randomly generated every single floor here. And when you get to the top, you're going to finally meet the Senstrel of Destruction. And his name is Gades, which I assume is a ripoff of Hades. And he sounds really ferocious until like they put a typo in the game that like really just pulled all the thunder out of what he was saying. He says, talking to us, he's going to show us what I call Frue, F-R-U-E, destruction. It's like, man, like, it's true destruction, and you said Frue, and now I just can't take seriously all this little evil plan you have going on. And there are actually several typos inside the game, not enough to like detract a whole lot from the experience, but every now and then you're going to be like, wait a second, I think that's a little off there. But anyway, Gades destroys the entire tower, at least the top part of it, and then we get into a fight with Gades himself. And the sprite during the battle for Gades is pretty top tier. All the sprites are pretty top tier inside the game. But I get demolished by Gades. I didn't even stand a chance. It was actually part of the main storyline. You're supposed to die here. And when you do die, he actually says, like, you know what, I'm going to let you live for a little while. Try again another time. Like, I guess he's a kind God in that aspect. He loves destruction, but he's giving me a chance. And so me and Cena here, we decided we need to travel off and find more fighters to join our team, because 2 people is just simply not enough to take Gades down. And so we journey to our closest town, which is a town called Albano. And at Albano, there's a really rich fellow everybody talks about called Mr. Fugo. And Mr. Fugo is basically the ruler of the town, and he hoards all the money from the town. Everybody in the town pays him money, and he uses all of that for his own benefit to build like a second guest house, and just a really, really greedy rich fella. So we approach Mr. Fugo's house here, and then a thief runs out of Mr. Fugo's house, and Mr. Fugo goes, "Hey, stop that fella. He stole all of my gold." And we're like, all right, we'll help you out here. Mr. Fugo says, if you help me, I'll give you half the gold. And we could definitely use the money because, we're trying to buy more armor and equipment. And so we said we're going to help him out here. And we journey to a place called Solani Cave where the thief is supposedly hiding out. Now, the enemies in Solani Cave, sort of the same ones that we had earlier, like the spiders and such. But we also get like a bee here. And we also get this really cool looking vine plume looking enemy. It reminds me so much of vine plume from Pokemon. But anyway, we do find the thief inside the 5th floor of the cave. And while we're talking to him, me and Cena get into an argument. She calls me stupid, and then we get like really upset about it. And we're arguing back and forth. And during our argument here, the thief sort of sneaks off and runs away. And we lost the thief because of our petty argument. And somehow Cena, because I guess she's a fortune teller, knows that the thief went to a town called Majarari, if I'm saying that correctly. And when we go into this town, we pretty much know immediately they are hiding the thief because everyone's like really suspicious about it. Everybody's, got sort of coded language about it. We're like, all right, we know the thief is here. But also Also in this town, we have our second cat inside the game. I forgot to mention it earlier. There's a cat inside the first town, and so we're going to do a cat counter at the bottom of the screen here. Anytime we see a cat inside the game, we'll give it a little extra point and see how many cats are in here at the close of the game. Because you know me, if there's a cat in the game, I automatically like the game more. But anyway, we talk to everybody in the town, we do our little detective skills, and then when we begin to exit out of the town, a giant monster emerges chasing after the thief, and the monster is getting ready to attack one of the thief's friends or one of the villagers of the town. And the thief sort of steps in and says, let's fight this monster, save our friend Coben here, who's his friend, and let's defeat this monster. So we get sucked into a battle here, us two and the thief, and the thief, his name is going to be Day, D-E-I, but together we're attacking this giant kangaroo chameleon looking fella, or creature. It reminds me a great deal of a Pokemon. Several creatures in this game like have designs that are just cartoonish enough and just wacky enough to look like actual Pokemon, and it just simply could be my interpretation of them. Some of the enemies in the game will be very realistic looking, like the frogs and such as those, but then you got creatures like this, you're like, hey, that's definitely a Pokemon. But anyway, we kill this giant kangaroo chameleon, and at this point Fugo comes out. How he got to this town, I don't know, but he comes out and he's like, oh my gosh, you just killed one of my pets. And at this point, the whole guise is gone, because now we see Fugo for who he really is. Fugo is an exotic animal hunter. He goes out and he finds all these crazy exotic animals across the world, and he knows that these animals eat gold, which is odd in of itself, but they eat gold. He brings them back to his house because he likes to have a large storage of these exotic animals, and he feeds them gold. And so he basically has all the townspeople collect gold, give him their money in order to feed his exotic animal habitat down in his basement. And that's the reason the town is so poor, because Mr. Fugo is hoarding all of their money just so he can have these weird creatures that don't even belong inside of his house. And he has a very negative attitude toward poor people anyway, because he has a statement here that says poor people have poor imaginations. I mean, he is like a elitist to the worst degree. And at this point, we're like, well, I don't really like this Fugo fella anymore. He's really selfish. He's really mean. He's mean to animals. And at this point, he takes his money, and he also takes the thief back to his house. And he's going to, I guess, torture the thief because he stole the money from him. And we're like, oh my gosh, like Mr. Fugo's an awful person, and we need to go help the thief in order to rescue him, because the thief was actually just simply doing a good thing for the people of the town and also for the animals. So then me and Cena, we go back to Fugo's house here. We find the hidden bookcase here, or a hidden stairway behind the bookcase. We go down into the basement. We can see for the first time Fugo's animal sanctuary. Sanctuary is the wrong word because they're not peaceful. I'm going to call it animal zoo down here, or animal captive cells. And down here we can see the gold scattered about, and we also see some of the animals at the same time. And at this point we do get into another fight with Mr. Fugo and his creatures, and we do defeat them a little bit tougher than the first fight. And now we've rescued Day, and Day is going to journey on to our team. So now I have 3 members of our team to help us fight against the Sinistrals on the Doom Island. It's going to come up later on in the story. And so we do exit out of Fugo's mansion here, and he gets all upset, and he's like, how could you do this, blah, blah, blah. And then the god of destruction, Gades, he shows up, and he's like, he's sick of hearing Fugo talk over here, and he destroys Fugo's little guest house off to the side. And Fugo gets like really upset. He's like, oh my gosh, how could you destroy my house over here? It's going to cost me all this money. And Gades like, you want me to destroy the one behind me too? And Fugo's like, whoa, I guess we're all right with just the guest house. And so you never thought you would root for Gades, the Lord of Destruction, but I mean, when he's taking out someone like Fugo, you're like, maybe Gades got some good stuff going here. But then Gades does challenge us to another fight, and just like the first fight, I think we're meant to lose it, because I do lose it miserably. And at this point, Gades says, like, I'll give you another try later on, but, I'll be back. And we discover that Day knows about a fighter to a city north of here, and the city's called Ciantro. And said there's a fighter up there, and we can journey up there, and we can get another team member to help us fight against Gades. At this point, I do journey around the map a little bit, sort of explore, and I do come across one cave called the Lampoon Cave, which seemingly didn't have like a direct point to the cave. However, inside the cave, I come across something called the Aluminum Blade. I just randomly got it from a battle here against, I think it was like zombie creatures. And the Aluminum Blade, holy cow, like it is probably not 4 times, probably 10 times more powerful than the weapon I was currently using. I go from doing like 50, 40 damage to now doing like 200 and something damage every single hit. And so this is going to be a game changer for me. And for my main character, Wayne here, or Ogles here, I'm not going to actually swap this weapon out until the very end of the game, when I have to swap it out for the final boss because of the overall gameplay storyline mechanics. And so I got a weapon here at the very early of the game that's going to last me the entire game, and that is fantastic, and it's going to make the game a heck of a lot easier for me. And so if you are playing the game, I do recommend going into this cave in order to get this weapon, because it's going to be a game changer. But let's get back to the main story here, because then I journey off to the town that they recommended, the town of Cianto. And when I get there, there's a gang called the Garland Gang that goes around robbing people, attacking people, you know, the usual gang activity. And the Garland Gang is getting ready to attack this little girl, and I'm going to step in and try to help out. Before I can do that, there's another character called Ama who also steps in, and she uses her karate skills or her ancestral monk fighting skills to scare him off. And we're like, hey, who are you? And she's like, I'm sort of the protector of this town. I'm here to try to stop the Garland Gang. And I learned all of my skills from the temple not too far from here that basically teaches a form of karate. And while we are talking to her, she actually gets word that the temple that she was mentioning has been set on fire and is being burned to the ground by the Garland Gang. And so we go there, and it turns out they've taken the monk, who's a person who teaches her entire fighting skill set, and they're holding him hostage until she basically comes and gives the scroll of an ancient text for an ancient fighting skill called Jijin Ryu, if I'm saying that correctly. I put the spelling on the screen here. But she doesn't actually have that ancient scroll to teach that fighting technique, and so she says we just simply need to break into the Garland Gang's hideout in order to rescue the master and sort of get things back into correct motion. So we go to the gang's hideout here, and once again, it's a randomly generated dungeon. You journey through it, and when you finally get down to the bottom of it, you have to fight against the gang's leader. And it's not too bad. The my extra team member here, having the aluminum blade, I'm actually melting through the enemies pretty darn fast. But once you defeat him, you do get a key. You get to rescue the monk master, and then at this point, we all hear a giant explosion outside of the cave. And so we rush back out of the cave. We go back to the main city we were at earlier, Cianto, and when we get here, the entire town has been completely destroyed and set on fire. And the Lord of Destruction, Gades, is at it again, and he comes down here and he's like, look, I destroyed this pretty much just for the fun of it. And the monk master gets really upset, and he uses a special ninja move called Energy Punch. He punches at Gades. He actually makes Gades bleed, a little blood puddle outside of him, which is sort of a unique for most Game Boy games at the time period, especially one that was not rated like T or M to have blood inside it. But anyway, he's made Gades bleed, and at this point, Gades just simply kills off the monk and says, like, you know what, I'm not putting up with this, dead like that. I guess I shouldn't say dead like that, because he does have some parting words, and he does teach Ama the energy punch here, and so she's going to learn that ultimate ninja skill that's going to be able to take out Gades. But Gades teleports away, goes back to the Tower of Destruction. But Gades does teleport back to the tower, and now we're going to have to journey off to the tower and have our final showdown with Gades. So once again, we journey through 10 randomly generated floors leading up to the Tower of Death here. We get to the top, we see Gades, and then me and Cena, we get into this weird argument once again. Like, it's an ongoing joke in this entire game, how we call each other stupid, and we get into these arguments, and it actually causes some like splits in the party later on. But there's one really great line here when she calls me stupid, and I say to Cena, I say, don't you know what Grandma says about people, or about calling people stupid? And then Cena replies, why would I know what your grandma says? So like such a great comeback to my line here. I don't know, the dialogue in the game is pretty witty, and so if nothing else, the game's worth going through just simply to have a pretty good witty dialogue and story. But the battle against Gades is going to have the same sprites here, the same moveset, and Gades is going to be way, way easier now to have a full team, and also since I have the aluminum blade, and I take Gades out literally the first try. And at this point, Gades is destroyed, and he says, that's fine, kill me off, there are still 3 more Centrales that you're going to take out after me. And we're like, holy cow, that's a lot. And so we decide, you know what, we're going to stick together as a team. We're going to recruit more team members, and we're going to take out the rest of these evil gods who are trying to destroy the world. Now this wraps up the first continent that we're on. There are 4 continents in the game. So now we're going to get on a little boat, and we're going to journey off to our next continent, which is the continent of Lidal. Or maybe it's Little, L-I-D-A-L, it's just simply spelled differently. I don't know. If you've watched any of my videos up to this point, you know my pronunciations are very hit and miss on these games. And so if you got any pronunciation corrections, please comment in the comment section down below, and I'll try to fix it on my next video if these words come up again. But on this new continent, we journey to our first town here, which is the town of Can, and we do have our cat counter number 3, and so we have our 3rd cat inside the game. But more importantly than the cat, we also find out there's a military takeover happening from the kingdom of Allsdalt, and they're trying to wipe out all of the smaller towns. And we're like, hey, that seems pretty cruel. And while we're in this town, a soldier sort of comes journeying in on his last leg here. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm about to die. And then Cena, she does like a little healing move over him, heals up, and he's like, all right, I'm well just enough to go back out into the forest here, or out into the wilderness, and I'm going to save the princess from being destroyed. And so we're like, holy cow, that soldier, if we just let him go out there, he's going to die because he barely has any life left. And also, who's this princess we're trying to save? So we need to get out there in order to save the princess. So we journey out into the overworld here. We sort of look around where we need to go. We end up finding a deserted lighthouse. We journey into it, journey through our randomly generated floors here. We go up about, I think it's like 5 or 10 floors, and we come across a battle here where the soldier is fighting off a giant serpent. And the soldier's name is Randolph, and he will end up joining our party, obviously, as we go here. But so we fight off this giant serpent, and once again, looks just like something out of like a Pokemon game. The sprites here, truly excellent. But we fight off here, and we win him over. He's now on our team. And so us and Randolph, a 4-person team now, we continue journeying up the tower here trying to find the princess. We get up to the top, and sure enough, there's the princess. She's fighting off this giant bug-looking monster. And the princess is actually holding her own pretty darn well. I'm not even really sure that she really needs this. But the sprite for this bug here, it's like a giant lightning bug. And even in like its moves have like a lightning or a flash effect. And so it's very fitting with the actual creature. A really cool standout monster inside the game. But after we help finish the monster off, the princess then explains the story a little bit better and then joins our team. Now, her name is Princess Melphis, Melphis, and when she joins the team, she says that she's the daughter of the king, but the king has been killed off by the minister of the kingdom. His name is Daraf, and so Daraf is sort of like the second in command, killed the king off, the princess fled, and the Daraf is trying to take over the kingdom of Allsdalt in order to basically take over the entire land. And so she's trying to basically pull up a force large enough to go fight up against the minister here in order to basically reclaim her kingdom. Now, the princess is not only a great fighter, but she's also very intelligent because she says if we want to take out Daraf, we need to basically cut off his military supply or his ammunition and his weapons and such that are going to his kingdom if we want to truly cut the head off of this military takeover. And she says, I think he's getting all of his ammunition from pirates who are stealing it from ships and whatnot. And so we journey down to a port city called Tomir Town. And at Tomir Town, we get a ticket to the ferry that we know the pirates are going to attack. We journey out on this little ferry here. The pirates, sure enough, do attack us. We journey onto the pirate ship. We journey through here. And oddly enough, you don't really fight a heck of a lot of pirates until you get down to the very bottom of the ship. And you fight the captain of the ship and 2 of his first mates. And looks very captain-y from the sprites. Not too bad of a battle because, once again, I've got a pretty decent team and also have the aluminum blade, which just sort of knocks me over the top here. We do see all the scattered weapons about on the pirate ship of what Daraf is trying to get taken back to his headquarters. And so we journey back to the top of the ship, and while we're at the top of the ship, we hear word off in the distance of another sailor. His name is Deckard, and Deckard has a giant blade on the front of his ship. It's a really awesome looking pirate ship here, and he hunts pirates. And so he comes flying through here, and he literally cuts our boat directly in half, and we're like, whoa, we're not pirates, we're good guys, but it's too late. The boat is cut in half, so we get back to our old boat, sail back to town, and we're at least like, hey, at least the weapons that were on that boat got destroyed, sunk to the bottom of the ocean. But if the pirates are bringing all of these weapons to a Daraf, we've got to go out and we've got to basically find the pirates' hideout and destroy all the weapon, all the ammunition is going to Daraf. We would truly want to destroy the rebellion here, or the takeover. And so now our goal is to find the pirates' hideout. And do we have a really good cutscene here where we hop on the boat and we go to this little cliff here, and the water, is breaking against the rocks, and we just simply wait because we know the tides are going to go down, and when the tides go down, the water level drops, and at that point it reveals the entrance to the pirates' hideout. I don't know, I just really enjoyed the cutscene here. It's just simply a cool little hideout for pirates to be in. But we journey in here, we go through 10 floors, and we actually fall through a little trap door. We fall into a prison cell, and the pirates are like, haha, we got you now. But we're not going to actually keep all of you. We're going to let the princess go because she's such a beautiful lady. And talk about pretty privilege there, letting the beautiful lady go. But while we're in this little cage here, he actually releases a giant Dodongo, like from Zelda, I guess, or a giant alligator, and it comes out and is going to begin to attack us. But the alligator is insanely easy, and we defeat the alligator first try, no problems at all. But then we go ahead and head through several more floors of the pirates' headquarters. We get down to a point where we fight the pirate leader again, or the captain, and same sprites, same basic attacks here of his little assistants who continue to be summoned over and over and over. And this one's actually a bit harder. I actually had to use a goddess tier, which is like a overall healing item for my entire team in order to take him out. But before we can actually rescue the princess, he actually teleports outside the cave with her, so we have to journey back outside the cave. We get out there, and he's actually set sail yet again. So we have to hop on our boat, and now we're chasing him through the ocean here, the seven seas, in order to try to rescue the princess and take out the captain. And so as we're doing this, we realize like his ship is like way fast, and our ship is not way fast, and so we're way behind him here. And at this point, our favorite little pirate killer, Deckard, shows up with his giant ship here, with his little blade once again, and he rams into the pirate ship. The princess actually gets thrown over onto our ship, and then at this point, Deckard also jumps onto our ship, and we're going to have our final showdown with the captain's pet here, which is a giant squid, in order to finally finish off the pirate storyline. And this battle here was a little bit more difficult than some of the other ones. The aluminum blade is still overpowered, but it's still a fairly difficult fight. Deckard actually comes in with a pretty darn good slash move, and so Deckard's actually a pretty good warrior we're going to have on our team later on. But after we win this battle, he does bid farewell. He goes back to his port city. We've destroyed the pirates. We've destroyed their ammunition base. Daraf, the minister who's trying to do a military takeover of the country, is now cut off from his ammunition, and so we journey back to the port town. But when we get there, everybody's all upset because it turns out that Daraf here is actually going to go ahead and continue on with his military takeover, and says, you know what, we'll just go with the weapons that we got, and we're going to start slowly but surely taking over all of the towns. And his final little holdout here before he journeys into his takeover is going to be at the Tower of Illusions. And so we're like, all right, so we've got to take our last chance here. We have to go and take Daraf out at the Tower of Illusions. But in order to get to that tower, we do have to go through a place called the Copley Forest. And the Copley Forest is a welcome sight in this game, because every dungeon up to this point that we've traveled through has always been like, just a regular dungeon or a cave. And this is our first one. It's actually going to be more of a green scenery, very colorful, different pink plants in it. Just a really colorful scenery as we're going through it. As we're journeying through the Copley Forest here, we get to one part where it's like the Lost Woods from Zelda, where like every screen just sort of repeats over and over and over. And me and Cena, we get into a fight here because we're like, hey, I think we've been here before, and she calls me stupid. I call her stupid. We get really upset. And at this point, Cena just decides, you know what, I'm leaving the party. I'm done with this. And we're like, fine, get out of here. And she leaves, and we continue on our path. She continues on her path. And when we finally get out of the little Lost Woods area here, at this point, we do see Cena has been injured, and there's a giant gopher-looking creature next to us. And we're like, holy cow, like, she's been hurt. Like, what have we done? We shouldn't have called her stupid. We got into all this over a dumb argument. And so we go up there and we try to attack this gopher-looking creature, and she's like, no. And she actually attacks us and like knocks us off the screen. And we're like, what's going on? She goes, this gopher here actually saved my life from another creature, and this gopher here is going to join our team. And so now we have another animal creature on our team. And it's actually a really cool teammate, because like he gets a free attack every single turn. He doesn't have to like be part of your individual selection of attack. Is you just simply do your 3 attacks, and he just throws in a fun attack off to the side. It's never like super powerful, but it's enough to sway the battle every now and then when it's a close one. But at this point, we realized that having this dumb argument over calling each other stupid was, stupid. And so at that point, Cena joins the team back again. The team is reunited. And I'm telling you, like, this stupid argument here is like played out through the entire game. And at some point, it gets a little bit on the old side. But there's a quote from the Garfield cartoon years and years ago, and it said, if you can keep a joke going long enough, it goes from being a funny joke to being a not funny joke. But if you keep the joke going on for long enough, it becomes what's called a running gag, and it becomes funny again. And that's where this stupid argument is going to be heading into. It is a category of running gag here. But our team is back together, so we journey to a little town north of here called Kobe. And at this point, we do get supplied up, and we meet our 4th cat inside the game. I think there should be like a reward inside the game for discovering every cat. But we are up to cat number 4. And so we supply up at the little town of Kobe, and then we journey off to the Tower of Illusions. And it should come as no surprise in the Tower of Illusions, since he's been hoarding ammunition, hoarding weapons and whatnot, that 10 floors up, our first boss is going to be like a giant cannon here. And the cannon battle was going fairly against me. And then that gopher creature came in and did like a critical attack, took like 800 damage away or 600 damage away, actually won the battle for me. So like I said, the gopher creature, he actually does come through in sometimes in a pinch of the battle. But at this point, the weapon itself teleports out of the tower, and it goes back to the kingdom of Asdalt. How it teleports, I don't know. But we're like, all right, we just need to go to the kingdom itself and get this like settled once and for all. I don't know why we're at the Tower of Illusions. Let's just go to the kingdom. Let's just take out Daraf. So we journey there. We get there. The town is like heavily fortified of, armies and whatnot all around it. We're like, we can't get in here. We need to find a way to go in through the east side, which has like a little port. And so we need to go over here, find a boat in order to journey into the city that way. So we load up on our little boat. We're journeying off into the city of Asdal. We get into a giant battleship battle, and at this point, Deckard sort of comes to the rescue, joins our team again. We defeat the battleship, and we finally can dock inside the kingdom here. And when we dock inside the kingdom, like, it's a huge revelation because, like, everyone's excited to see the princess because they're like, I thought the princess was already here, and it turned out the Daraf, the minister who's taken over, had like hired a princess look-alike so he could look like, you know, the royalties on the side of his takeover when she's not on the side of his takeover. So the truth is coming out against Daraf, and so the military takeover is already sort of falling apart behind the scenes because the princess is able to win back her kingdom little by little. But we are trying to take out Daraf, so we journey through the castle dungeon itself. The best enemy here is what I'm going to call an opulent turtle. I think it may actually be like a little, you know, armor on top of his head, but it looks so much like he's wearing like a little purple opulence at the top. A great enemy. We actually battled Daraf in this little area as well. He also has like a little purple robe on. You know, I can just see him having like a little purple turtle next to him. A great little character analysis here that I'm creating, or characteristics for Daraf. But anyway, we fight against him pretty darn easy. Have the entire party intact as we go through the battle here. And then once we defeat him, we heal up and we go against the ultimate weapon he's created. And it's a giant cannon, has like Gatling guns on it, has a ton of HP. And it takes me a while to actually be able to take this one out because oftentimes when you get toward the end of the battle, he actually does like a self-destruct move. And when it self-destructs, if your main character dies, your whole team dies. It's a rule I forgot to mention earlier. And so if your main character doesn't have enough life when he self-destructs, he kills him off and then you lose the entire battle. So you have to make sure that your character has enough HP pretty much persistent throughout the entire fight here because you don't want that self-destruct move to take him out. But once the cannon's destroyed, Daraf dies, and we think like, hey, the kingdom is back to normal here. We've taken out the fellow who's doing the military takeover. But it turns out one of the Sinstrels, the Sinstrel of Chaos, his name is Amon, is actually behind all of this. He's the one who basically influenced Daraf to go against the kingdom and try to do a takeover. And it wasn't because he wants anything. He's just simply the Sinstrel of Chaos. And so, you know, he just likes to put the world in a little bit of a spin. And part of his spin was to do a military takeover to kill the king, kill the princes, kill all these kingdoms, and kill all these towns just simply for the heck of it here. And so the Sinstrel of Chaos is quite the, you know, terrifying fella. But anyway, so he teleports. He says he's behind all of this. Amon does. And then he teleports back over to his little tower here. And we're like, all right. So now if we want to truly get this little continent back in order, we got to find Amon here. And we have to basically take him out, you know, permanently. And I'm not going to talk about the adventures for the caves or the tower itself because most of that's pretty repetitive inside the game. And when we finally get to the top of the tower, we get to fight against Amon. And he's a really cool, like, two-handed or two-sword-handed robot beast here. One of the best looking sprites in the game. There are some really good ones, but this is one of my favorite ones that we come across. But his main move here is he can confuse your team. And when he confuses your team, you just simply start attacking each other, and you get wiped out pretty darn fast. However, I do have what's called a sanity ring, and if you put the sanity ring on, it prevents you from being confused. So I put this on all of my main team members who are doing all of the attacks. And at this point, I pretty much win the battle first try. It makes it way easier. Really, if you read through the description of the items, and it takes a little while in some of the menus to actually go through and read them all, you can actually equip yourself pretty darn well to win a lot of these battles without having to be over leveled or anything like that. But when we do defeat him, he says like humans are never going to get along. We should just sort of give up on that conquest. But he passes away here, and the princess invites us back to her castle and says, hey, let's have a giant feast. We go back there. You know, the party's going well. We're all celebrating. Things are going good. And then the spirit of Amon shows up, and he's like, hey, I'm dead, but I'm not really dead. I'm going to put one last spell on the princess. And he puts a spell on her that basically turns her against everyone. And sort of like a spell that was put on Daraf a little bit. And she's getting ready to go into her own little chaos mode. And at this point, Deckard steps in and is like, hey, let's stop this because let's remember who you really are. And Deckard then reveals that he is actually the brother of the sister. He's the prince. And so at this point, she comes to her senses because she actually sees her family, you know, reminded of her childhood, things like that. And she comes back around, like, you know, sort of breaks through the spell and becomes her regular old princess self again. And so now we have a sort of a story reveal that Deckard is now the prince of this kingdom. And one really cool aspect of this, it's like sort of like an Easter egg inside the game, is that if you go up to the throne inside the kingdom here, you can actually pick up a crown off of the throne, and the only member of your party who can wear the crown is Deckard. And it's so fitting because he's actually the prince who's going to be inheriting the kingdom over now that his father has passed away. And that's a detail you could easily miss inside the game if you just simply didn't walk up to the throne and pick it up. And you could actually discover that before the plot reveals it because you can equip this on Deckard if you picked up the crown earlier when you're inside the castle. And so, I don't know, I like it when games do stuff like this, and it's a really cool little detail. But Deckard and the princess decide that they can't really rule over their kingdom effectively until they know that all the Sinstrels are taken out, so they join together, and off we set sail on Deckard's ship now, journeying off to our next continent to try to take out yet another Sinstrel. And this continent is going to be called the continent of Fante, Fante. And on this continent, we go to our first city called El Corano. And this continent itself is going to be more of a desert continent. It's got like little cactus, stuff like that. And so El Corano even sounds like a Spanish name. And so perhaps this continent here is modeled a little bit after either the southwest of America or Mexico. I'm not sure on that. But regardless, in this first town, we do talk to some of the town folk. They talk about a dragon who's blocking the passageway from their town to a town called Redwoods. And they need to get rid of this dragon to open up the trade back up a little bit. And there's also a small love story here between two lovebirds, and one of the lovebirds, he's gone off to try to fight the dragon. And, we're going to now try to journey off to help him win the fight in order to make sure he gets back to town safely, and also to defeat the dragon itself. And so we go through this little, cave here, and we fight the dragon off. It looks more like a giant, slick-looking gray snake. But, pretty darn easy here. We defeat him, head back to the town, to say, like, hey, we've done all this. The little love story between the two little soldiers here is going really well. And then Mama Dragon comes in and drops down to the town. It's like, hey, you killed my little baby dragon. This is it for you. And so we have to fight now again against the Mama Dragon. We've almost got her killed. And then a mysterious figure shows up, and he does like a one-shot kill and finishes the dragon off. We're like, wow, thanks for your help, man. That was really nice. And then the mysterious figure does a one-shot kill and kills off one of the lovebirds. We're like, wow, love story over inside the game here. And everybody's like, what the hell, man? Like, why'd you kill one of the lovebirds off? Why are you just killing random people in general? And so at this point, he reveals himself to be Deus, the god of terror. So we've met the third Sinstrel here. And obviously, he likes to strike terror in people. And what better way to strike terror than just simply random killings like this? And so now we realize, all right, so we're going to have to fight the Sinstrel here, the god of terror, for this particular continent. And so now we're going to have to journey off and try to figure out, all the lore, all the little stories in order to get to him. So we journey off to Redwood, and look at here, we got our next cat. So let's add to our cat counter. As I'm filming the video, I've actually lost the particular number, but I'm going to keep up with it on the screen so we know which cat we have seen here. And at Redwood, we journey off into a little casino. And at the casino, we're going to meet two different people. We're going to meet Tak, who's a real ass, and he's really sexist to all the waitresses here, says really crude and nasty things. And then we have Ruby, who's actually better at gambling than Tak, and she's going to really sort of show him up at all times and just sort of put him in his place the majority of the time. Obviously, Ruby is the better character. He's going to join our team, and Tak is going to meet a fairly unfortunate end as the game comes along. But we talked to Ruby because it seems like she'd be a good asset for our team, and she basically says, I only work with people who are better at me than gambling. And so we're like, all right, so let's figure out how to be better than her at gambling. Well, there's a particular gambling game in this town called Monster Track. And so what we have to do here is we have to journey to Azoli's cave and capture a monster called Big Mouth. And if we're the first one to capture this particular monster, we win the little gambling game. Now, how is that gambling? I don't really know. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but evidently Ruby's participating in this game, and we have to participate in it as well in order to show her our skills. So we head off to Azola's cave in order to find this big mouth creature. We journey through all of this, and we'll make a long story short here. We have an initial rivalry against Ruby because we're both trying to take out this creature, but ultimately we have to team up together in order to take the creature out. And when we take the creature out together, we claim the victory together, and Ruby does end up joining our team. And so once we win here, we go back to the town. We talk to a fella inside of the casino, and he's like, hey, I would like to invite you all to my house as a victory celebration for basically capturing the big mouth. And we're like, all right, sweet. So we go back to his little castle here. We get down, we sit down, we have this massive feast. And you can see here, it looks like a great little feast. Food for everybody to eat. And it also, gives us plenty to drink, and it seems like a great little party. But then it turns out he had actually drugged all of us, and he's going to try to basically hold us prisoner, and he's a taxidermist, and he's going to preserve us as he does all the winners of this contest and house us inside of his basement. Like a really, really horror story here. However, like Day, the thief from the beginning of the game, he had a suspicion about this, and he actually didn't eat or drink any of the food, and he also helped to rescue me from the situation. And so we journeyed down into the basement to try to stop the taxidermist from basically killing off our entire team here and stuffing all of them. And the boss battle against the taxidermist here is actually pretty easy because he does call to life one of his, I guess, subjects here. that's been stuffed, and they have a boss battle against us, and I just simply have Day attack the companion, kill the companion off, and the taxidermist keeps summoning a new companion while I attack the taxidermist, and one of the easier boss battles in the game. A lot of these boss battles, if you figure out like a good strategy, you can take them out pretty quickly, but you do have to try them a few times to actually develop that strategy. But at this point, Ruby does join our team, and our team is slowly growing larger and larger here. And Ruby mentions we should head off to a town called Tamba in order to try to figure out more about this particular Sinstral, where the Tower of Sorrows sort of glooms over here, because obviously if there's a giant tower, that's where the Sinstral is going to be, so we know we're heading in the right direction here. And we talk to everyone in the town, and it turns out there's a second love story going on here. We have a character named Jan, and they're in love with Sammy, and Jan has gone off to the tower in order to defeat Deos, in order to basically clean the town up in order to get ready for their wedding. Now, obviously, we care about the wedding. We want that to go well, but also, this is a god of destruction, or a god of terror, or a god of, which one is this god of? It's a Sinstral. It's one of the evil gods here. And we're like, we need to take out this particular god of Deos. So then we head up there in order to help with this fight. Now, we get there, and we join forces with Jan, and we do pretty well against the fight here, and we think that we've destroyed Deos. So we're like, all right, everything should be good. It seems like Deos passed away here. Let's head back to the town. We go back to the town, and while we're there, we get to witness the wedding of Jan and Sammy. And during the wedding here, it's like the saddest thing in the world. Deos shows back up, and when Deos shows back up, he actually doesn't murder either one of them, but he turns Sammy, or at least converts her mind anyway, into thinking that Jan is some sort of beast, and she cannot rest until she kills off Jan. And at this point, Jan's like, all right, if this is Sammy's life for the rest of her life, I'm just going to off myself. And so Jan kills themselves, and at this point, Sammy comes back to her mind, and Sammy's like, oh my gosh, what had happened? The love of my life is now dead right in front of me. And Sammy is very upset over this, but Jan's last words were like, look, this is the only way you could return to your life and be normal again. If it means that I have to die, then so be it. It's a really, really sad story. And so Deos here, he's really living up to his name of God of Terror, because he's just striking terror in everyone here in this town. And we actually get to witness the funeral service for Jan, and we actually get to go to their grave here. If you go to the grave, like, this is a weird part of the game. You can loot the grave. You can get an engagement ring at the grave. And something that's really odd about the game is you can take that, if you put the engagement ring on, you go to shops, you get like to be able to negotiate a better price for items at the shops. And I don't know, like, that's just a really weird thing. It reminds me of that Seinfeld episode, like where George's fiance passes away and he tries to use that as like leverage in order to like get more dates and whatnot. It reminds me of this here, like you're using this engagement ring of a dead marriage, or a dead almost marriage, this tragic story, in order to get better prices at the shop. It's a really weird take for the game to have here, but hey, it is definitely in the game. But at this point, Deos goes back to the tower, blows a little bridge up in order to get to the tower. We're like, great, well now we can't even get to the tower in order to fight him anymore. And so we do hear about a scientist who lives in the city of Molo Goro. I'm telling you, I have to read every single one of these names off my note pages here. Every video I'd make extensive notes on these games, but I would not be able to retain these town names in my head. It's just simply, there's so many of them, and they're just so random words to go along with it. But anyway, in the town of Molo Goro, there's a professor, and evidently this professor can modify our boat here in order to become like an aircraft, and we could actually fly to this tower. So we go to the area here. We try to talk to the scientist. It turns out that he's not even at his laboratory. He's down studying hot springs at an island called Golo Golo. Okay, and we head down there to Golo Golo. And when we get down there, there's actually like chicken dragons in here, which is a really odd little creature they've created for the side of this game. But we get to the bottom of Golo Golo, and there, of course, is the little scientist. He's studying hot springs, and while he's studying all of this, he actually ends up making a mistake, and oil starts coming out of the hot spring. Then a dragon shows up, because he accidentally, like, had a little cave explosion. The dragon shows up, breathes fire on the oil, and then, like, we blow up and we fly outside of the cave here. And at this point, the professor's like, all right, well, stuff like that happens sometimes. Anyway, I'm the professor. What can I do for you? And we're like, we need you to help us modify our boat in order to fly. And he's like, all right, well, that's easy. I just need a mineral called floatium. No, I mean, come on now. Could we get a little more creative with the names here? I know I just complained how the names, I can't ever remember any of the stuff, but floatium for changing something into something that floats. A little on the nose here for the game. But anyway, he says we need to go to the Tamba Shrine in order to get this floatium. So we journey off to the Temple of the Shrine. We get down to the bottom of that. We see the floatium. And when we touch it, we're accidentally transported over to the Tower of Sorrow. And so when we get there, it's just simply me and Cena who are transported over there. We get to fight against Deus, and we do very, very poorly in this particular battle because it's just simply the two of us. It was a meant-to-be battle once again. But while we're sitting there pretty much almost dead, evidently the other people in the party did get the floatium, took it back to the professor. They built the little aircraft. They come in, they rescue us, and they take us back to the laboratory and like, all right, we need to have our rematch against Deus, and we need to be really prepared for it where the whole party can go in there and not just the two of us. But at this point, my ship is able to fly around. I do fly around the map a little bit. I explore. I do find a city called Midi, and I do find another cat in the city. But the city of Midi here, it's a wonderful little city, just like an elven sanctuary tucked away in the woods, little wooden houses, like the Keebler Forest almost. A great little city, and like I said, we did get our next cat here as well. But anyway, so let's go back to the Tower of Terror or Tower of Sorrow to take out Deus. Now we journey through the tower. I think it's 20 floors tall on this one. Yeah, it is quite the tower. But when we do fight against Deus, I really only win it because I'm just constantly reviving and using miracles, and I'm just constantly bringing my characters back to life. I've not done real well as far as like teaching them some of those individual spells. I've really been coasting off that aluminum blade too long, and the game's going to start to catch up with me a little bit as far as some of my weaknesses here. But when you finally do defeat him, Deus does say, like, you can't really ever truly kill the gods. And Cena goes, actually, you can. You just simply need a weapon called the Dual Blade, because that's what Maxim, who was the hero of one of the earlier Lufia games, used to kill the gods. But if that was the case, and she actually used it to kill the gods, then why are we fighting against the gods again? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But regardless, we need the Dual Blade. And so we now also need to head off to our next continent, which is the continent of Rose Pleat. Now, Rose Pleat is less of a continent and more like these islands down here, because it's going to be more scattered about. That's where the city of Midi was at, I mentioned earlier. And so we go down to the city of Midi again. We talk to them. They say that there's a character named Milka who's waiting at the Rose Pleat Shrine, and says when all of the 11, I guess, chosen spiritual leaders, who are 10 are on our team, and evidently Milka is the last one here, but when they're all gathered together, they can look into this little crystal ball, and the crystal ball will tell them where the Dual Blade is located at. They can get that Dual Blade in order to kill off the last of the Sinstrels. And so they look in the little crystal ball here, and it turns out that the Dual Blade is located on Doom Island, which has sunk down to the bottom of the ocean, fallen from the sky to the bottom of the ocean, probably at the last of one of the last Lufia games. And we're going to have to figure out a way to get to the bottom of the ocean. Well, it turns out the only way to do it is to convert our ship from being an aircraft and a regular ship to being a submarine. But in order to do that, we need yet more floatium, which makes 0 sense, because wouldn't you need something like Sinkium in order to sink to the bottom of the ocean? But anyway, so we need more floatium. They tell us where to get it. We go get it out of this cave here. We get it, we modify our ship, and then off we go, sailing down, or I guess diving down to Doom Island underwater. It almost looks like Atlantis when you get under here. Like you can see outside the little windows of Doom Island, sort of the ocean life and ocean atmosphere. It's a cool little effect. Very small. Doom Island is very, very small when you get down here. But you do find a Dual Blade down here. You can pick up the Dual Blade, and it also summons the last of the Sinstrels. Iram, who's the one of resurrection, is brought to life, and she's going to begin to fight me. Now, this Sinstrel here is much more fashionable than the other ones. The other ones were very much of a robotic or, very beastly looking. Iram is very fashionable little Sinstrel here, and she actually is going to die pretty quick inside the battle, but she doesn't really die because she's the Sinstrel of resurrection, and she actually brings back the other 3 that I've already destroyed, and they all journey off to the Tower of Twilight. And evidently, in order to finally take the Sinstrels out, I'm going to have to journey to the Tower of Twilight now, journey to the top of it in order to take them out. And so I journey over there, I get to the top, and the 3 that I've already defeated then combine themselves into the form of what's called the Guard Deus. And it's a crazy looking sprite here, really futuristic, almost like reminds me in the show Beast Machines, where they mix like the organic and the techno together. Reminds me a little bit of that as far as like the imagery goes, but was very, very difficult, and I died many times here. And I finally figured out, like, A, I'm under leveled, because I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but also B, like, I never really developed like a lot of the different spells I could use as far as like learning ancient text and whatnot. And so I actually like looked up online, like, what are some powerful ancient text spells to use, and there was one called Holy Blade. So I like went through, grinded through the game, got the Holy Blade, got that. Also got one from my other character, the Final Dance, which takes away 1/4 of the HP of any creature you're fighting against. And so I do this, and I grind for like 3 hours getting these particular spells, grinding my characters up, and finally, I can go back and I can fight this battle here But I'm telling you, even when I won, I only had one character left when I won this battle. And look at this. I got 0 experience points when I actually beat the battle. Talk about like massively disappointing, because you really wanted to use that experience points to level your characters up a little bit, and you just simply did not get to do that. But after we defeated the conglomeration of all the different gods here, at this point, everyone's celebrating. We're all like, hey, great little party. Let's get it going. You know, this is exciting times. But then Cena comes up here and is like, actually, I've got some pretty bad news. I'm actually possessed by Iram, the god of resurrection. So sorry to bust a bubble here. The party's not really happening because I'm getting ready to destroy everyone. And so we go into another battle here with Aram, the Lord of Resurrection. And so we defeat her, this time really easy defeat. And when we defeated her, like, it turns out that like she actually wanted to die on purpose. And it turns out like the whole storyline here was really weird. So Cena was a fortune teller, and she was possessed by Aram, the Sinstral. And so in order to basically defeat the Sinstrals, she wanted our hero to kill us. And in order to do that, she actually befriended the hero, went through all this journey, helped defeat all the other Sinstrals, and then had the basically the final battle here in order to sort of, I don't know, what's the right word for it? Tank the fight on purpose in order for us to kill her, in order to finally kill all the Sinstrals here. So she was like sacrificing herself. And so a really conflicted little thing going on here. And so it's like Cena herself was a good person, but she was possessed. And so it's like, well, which one do we really trust? Who was talking more? Was it Cena? Was it more of the Iram? You know, it's hard to know there. But regardless, we really cared for Cena as a character, and it's hard for us to accept that she was possessed for a great deal of the game. But then, Aram comes out, the little spirit anyway, and is like, actually, well, it's not quite over. I'm actually going to summon one more in order to try to take everybody out. And this is Zalbak, the infernal god of flame. And he's going to come through here as he first off absorbs Cena's spirit, and then basically uses that in order to try to destroy the entire world. And we're like, oh my gosh, yet another one. Well, Zalbak does end up making his home over here at Doom Island. And so now we have to journey to Doom Island, have our final showdown with Zalbak with Cena's spirit inside of this creature here. A really creative sprite for this particular enemy. Looks very similar to the one on the overworld here. But I really just enjoy the design, the artistic direction that went with a lot of these individual sprites. But this was a very hard battle because Zalbak actually gets to have 3 moves for every single 1 move that you get. And so this battle probably took me on and off try maybe like an hour to take out. Really difficult here. But this is the last boss in the game, and when Zalbak is finished off, you have a little scene here. Cena's battered body's in front of you, and you're like, oh my gosh, like Cena's been through so much. It was just a ordinary person who was possessed here by the gods or the Sinstrals and used pretty much for all this evil plot. And she even tried to use her influence in order to try to stop this from happening by allowing us to sort of kill her within the tanked battles. But still, it's a very sad story, and Cena sort of says her final goodbyes here. And we've saved the world, we've killed off all the Sinstrals, but we also lost a dear friend in the process. Her final words were like, we will meet again someday. And it does transfer storyline wise to 1 year later. And I'm in my little hometown village here. I tell my aunt I'm going like, some sort of small mission or something, picking up like an apple or something. I don't know, something a little weird like that. But as I'm journeying out of the town, I hear a voice behind me. It's actually Cena. She's like, actually, I didn't die. She goes, turns out I'm a fortune teller, like I said in the very beginning of the game, but I'm not really a fortune teller. I'm more of a maker of the future come true, I guess. I don't know what the word for that would be. But anything she speaks will eventually come into existence. And so she said all the times I thought I was telling the fortune, I was just simply speaking what's going to happen. And so she said, we will meet again. And sure enough, my love for you resurrected me. Here I am. We can finally live our life out once and for all. And I'm like, this is awesome. We're really excited about it. We have our little fun little dialogue back and forth. And then it says, like, we have one more journey we're going to go on. We're going to go to Esto Land, where Doom Island landed after the final battle here, just sort of finish up all the little loose ends. And then it goes a little cutscene of every character you've encountered inside the game, as far as like on your party anyway. And it's going to go through a little cutscene here of each one of them also deciding, some independently, some with your help, to also journey to Doom Island in order to finally have this final reunion battle or this reunion adventure. And I guess that's going to be the next game in the series, even though I'm not really sure the storyline ever actually got continued. But at this point, the cutscenes finish up with me and Cena say we're never going to leave each other ever again, and we journey off on our new adventure, and the credits begin to roll. And a great little credit scene where it's just sort of like the greatest hits of the game, and I love credit scenes that do this, and good music behind it as well. But let's talk about the game as an overall. This game here, it's very long. It probably took me I would say this probably took me 40 hours to finish. This is a very long game. There's a lot of grinding in some spots where you, especially toward the end of the game, but not really in the middle because I got the aluminum blade, which helped out a lot. But the game is a really excellent game. As far as like a great storyline, it's one of the best RPG storylines I've come across. It's definitely better than the Dragon Warriors games, at least for me. Dragon Warriors Monster, Great Greed. I've not played the Final Fantasy Legend games yet on the Game Boy, so those may be better. But at the moment, this is the best storyline I've come across. I liked how it's divided up amongst these gods here. I liked how it's a continuation of like the lore of the first two games, even though I haven't played those. It seems like a rich lore, and I like how it's like summarized up, and you know, it's sort of a almost like departmentalized, so like individual chapters for each part of the game. And so the storyline was really good, the dialogue was really clever, and I liked how like the characters themselves. I do like when you get to name a character, especially like your hero, but also I like that the characters here actually felt like individual characters on your party. They weren't just like people, you know, you just like, hey, I'm going to choose a thief, I'm going to choose a swordsman, I'm going to choose a magician. That's my team. And there's no like character development. There was definitely character development for every single member of your party, and it was just also excellently written as well, even though it had a few typos here and there. But also the battle system. The battle system really does stand out inside this game because it's not a traditional RPG. It looks like it plays like one, but it is far and beyond a regular RPG. This whole idea of having like these life points and spiritual force in order to learn like ancient spells, have to like align your characters in certain orders in order to have like your attackers up front, your magicians in the back. As far as like where they're at, it's going to depend on like how much damage they're going to do, or like how their life points are going to total up, or their spiritual force points are going to total up, depending on where they're at in like this little grid here. A very complex system, and I've not ever played a game that had a system like this. And I don't know of any other game that does have a system like this. It's very unique for this game, and I think it's one of the best RPG systems that I've come across for a game, and it makes the game way more fun as you're going through these battles. It makes it feel a little less grindy, at least for me. I also really liked how like the enemies were above the ground, you know, so you can actually see which enemies you want to attack, which ones you want to avoid. I've always loved when RPGs do that. The first game I ever played like that was the Mother games, and I've always thought that was one of the top tier ways of doing battles inside of a game. This game continues on that. And also, just looking like a game for the Game Boy Color, this game was a great looking game as far as like the sprites go, the individual battles, the colors throughout the game. A great game in pretty much every single way. If there's one thing I could change about the game though, I might make the game just a little bit shorter because 40 hours into the game, as much as I did enjoy it, I'm like, all right, you know, the game probably could be wrapping up a little bit sooner than later. Maybe take out a few of the little side quests that you do throughout the game. That might help out a little bit. But overall, a near perfection in the game, and it's definitely the best RPG that I've played thus far. I'd give it a 9 out of 10, as a solid, very solid score. I might want to move it up one day, depending on what the other RPGs show on the system. So who knows? It might move up to being a 10 if it's the best RPG on the Game Boy Color. I'll find out. But you know, we'll figure it out as we go. But for right now, I'm giving it a solid 9. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out my other videos listed up above, and go out there, find a great game to play. Simply have a great rest of the day.